What's up, y'all? Alvin here, and in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 things I wish that I knew before I started fly fishing. I tell the good jokes. Number 1, tippet is just monofilament. Now, this is surprisingly a common question. What's the difference between tippet and monofilament? And there's not any. It's the same stuff. Now, there are some details that may or may not be important to you. And there's reasons why you would buy tippet and reasons why it's okay to just buy monofilament. Tippet is going to be a pretty consistent diameter and a pretty consistent pound test, or at least it's going to be close to what is labeled on the package. If that's not important to you, if you don't care the pound test, if you don't care the diameter, you just want to eyeball it, make your leader, just use a straight piece of mono, you can. Or you can get all fancy and buy a bunch of spools of tippet and tie your own leaders, or buy the tippet material that actually matches the tippet of your leader. And it's going to be pretty consistent. So, usually smaller batches, less likely to go bad before you use it, stuff like that. There's reasons to buy tippet, but tippet is just monofilament. Okay, number 2. It's not that hard. It's a little different, and it does take a little bit of time, but it's not that hard. So the fly cast is something that is a little bit different, but I feel pretty confident with most people who are, of average, physical skill, that I could take them out and in a day teach them how to cast well enough to actually catch fish. Now, there's some circumstances, sight casting to saltwater fish where it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But I have actually had first timers catch a redfish on the fly the first time out. Wouldn't recommend it, but it has happened. So it takes some practice, but it's not that hard. Okay. Speaking of practice, one of the things I wish I knew before I started fly fishing was that it actually is important to practice when you're not fishing. So you've got a rod, you've been fishing a few times, you want to step up your game. What you should do is practice when you're not fishing. Because when you're fishing, there's a whole bunch of other things that you're thinking about that are going to kind of distract you from actually taking your time and working on your cast. So you should definitely practice your casting when you're not fishing. All right. Number 3. It's not just trout. So that's one of the things that, working at a fly shop for years, people would come in and be like, oh, man, I didn't realize y'all were exclusively trout gear in here, And I'm like, no, man, we got all kinds of stuff. We got bass rods, we got saltwater rods, we got all kinds of stuff. That is one of the things that a lot of people think when they first get into fly fishing. It's that it's just trout. They think you got to go to the mountains, you got to go, some exotic destination to chase trout. But pretty much any fish that swims, there's probably somebody who's caught them on a fly rod. So it's not just trout. All right, so before we get to number 4, if you're enjoying this video, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And if you really, really, really want to help me out, I just started up a Patreon page. You can go over there. You can support me financially, help me make more of these videos, help me share more of this information that I've gathered over the last nearly 50 years of fly fishing. Links in the description And you can also sign up for my email list. I kind of keep you in touch with me, what I'm doing, what I got coming up next. And, if these social media channels all of a sudden decide to go away, you still have my email. You can still get in touch with me. Okay, so number 4, it's not just floating flies. Now, I made a video recently, I'll link that up there, about how I quit nymphing for trout years ago, and I pretty much only fish dry flies or dry fly droppers. But the thing is, that is a very small aspect of the sport where you're just fishing bugs floating on the surface, whether that's a dry fly for a trout or a popper for a bass. So like I was saying a minute ago, you can catch just about any fish that swims on a fly. And the thing is, most of those fish are not going to be eating something on the surface. So you're doing everything from throwing dry flies, poppers, to slow sinking, diving, and even going down super deep with heavily weighted flies on weighted sinking fly lines. So you can fish down, if you really need to, you could probably get a fly down 20 feet in the water column. It ain't going to be easy. It ain't going to be fast. And in my book, it ain't going to be fun, but it can be done. So it ain't just floating flies. All right, here's another one. I wish I knew this. Even though I was doing it, I thought I was doing it all wrong. You can catch fish in other places other than the mountains. You don't have to go to the mountains. I fished for probably a decade. I fly fished for a decade before I ever went to the mountains, before I ever cast a fly into some water that might have had a trout. So the idea that you can't fly fish anywhere and everywhere is something that I think everybody needs to realize. Fly fishing is a perfect way to catch just about any fish you want to catch. So it ain't true that you can't fly fish in Texas, in Oklahoma, in wherever. If there's water, there's fish in the water, you can probably catch them on a fly rod. All right, so let's keep going. Something else that I wish I knew before I started fly fishing was that it is not an elitist sport. So you see that portrayed a lot in the media. It's an expensive sport. It's only for rich white dudes that are going to these fancy exotic destinations. That's not true. I've been plenty of places where people are fly fishing. That's just the way you do it. It's not just rich guys, definitely not just white guys, because look at me, I'm right here. So yes, fly fishing is for everybody. And here's one other. Now, I knew this was not true, but this is a misconception that a lot of people have, and that is that fly fishing is boring because they think of fishing and they think boring. Well, fly fishing is anything but boring. I have people say all the time, like, oh man, I just don't have the patience to do that, So I'm assuming they're imagining that we're sitting on the bank somewhere soaking worms and drinking Old Milwaukee or Busch Light or something. And that's not what's going on at all. It's constant action, constant motion. You're always trying to figure out your next move. And I think it's one of the most exciting ways to catch a fish. All right, if you agree with me, give me a thumbs up. If you don't agree with me, give me a comment. I want to thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you got something out of the video. And if you need a little bit more help, maybe 5 things to help you stop struggling so much, you could check out that video right there.